right, welcome to the Finance and Fiscal Resources Committee meeting today. It's Tuesday, March 7, about 8:35 a.m., and our first item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone from the public who would like to comment today? Come up to the mic, and you've got 3 minutes.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Good morning, DeAndre.
How you doing, everybody? My name is DeAndre Jones. I'm here because I would like to ask my Kent County commissioners for support eventually, as I'm bringing esports competitions here, as I'm looking to reduce violence. I just looked on my Facebook, and a couple years ago, I was at the neighborhood summit here in the city of GR, and I was listening to the weapons ordinance, and I could tell the difference from the fake guns and the real guns, if you guys actually remember when they had them on the green board. Because I've seen so many real guns in real life and seen a lot of shootings, and so I can tell when somebody has a real gun on them usually. And so I'm really passionate about trying to end as much gun violence as possible. I don't think I'll stop everybody from shooting, but I believe if I had the resources and the financial backing, or not even the financial backing, but just the financial resources to give back to my community, to create events, to create true change, to go into trenches, to go in these hoods, to go into these communities where people are shooting, to talk to these people from these gangs, because I know the people that are usually in these big gangs and these gangs that are usually shooting people up and shooting each other. And I believe if I had the resources to go in these neighborhoods and do cool, innovative things, that I could change my community and I could reduce gun violence. Today also I'm going to go eat at the police department. My cousin was killed by a police officer in Chicago, Illinois, and so police violence, police brutality, police and community relations is something that means a lot to me, and today is his birthday. And so today I'll be going to the GRPD Police Department. They have prayers and some type of event. I'm really not a religious person. I'm very spiritual, but I respect how everybody experiences the universe around us. I believe we coexist. And so I'll be going to there. I'll be eating with the police officers. I usually have good relationships with the police officers, but everybody doesn't have that trust. And I'm looking to try to build some type of trust, some type of sense of humanity here in our Kent County, but the city of Grand Rapids, and further on across the state too. I've been talking to our state police. I would love for Kent County Sheriff's Department to get involved with my esports competition, just to kind of strengthen our community. I've talked to the community development officer, but I haven't heard anything back so far. I don't know what's going on, but I would just really love to strengthen our community, because I mean, I've been affected by gun violence. I've been affected by police brutality. I have a permanent scar on my eye from a police officer that was acting unjust and getting inside my house. And so I don't like to look at you guys, and I like to look at you guys as human beings and not a Republican or a Democrat, because it's things that you guys care about, it's things that I care about. But I'm just here to ask you guys for some resources eventually, so I can change my community and be the change I want to see.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public who'd like to speak? All right, seeing none, our next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. And it includes items A and B. Is there support for or a motion for the consent agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Kallman, support by, was that Commissioner Sparks?
Yes.
All right. Is there any questions or comments, any changes to the consent agenda? All right, seeing none, all those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. Next item comes from the Administrator's Office, Fiscal Services. It's the fiscal year 2024 budget process guidelines.
Action requested. Recommend to the Board of Commissioners to approve the following list of guidelines to be used in preparation of the 2024 county budget. Summary of request. The County Administrator Controller is directed to present a general fund budget that is structurally balanced and to establish the appropriate budget targets to achieve the goals laid out in the board's strategic plan. Zero-based budgeting will be utilized for all line items, so that each department should assume that the account rolls back to zero at year end. They will need to rebuild the rationale for all expenditures within that line item. There will be additional general fund resources provided for requested new positions that meet a critical need or provide a vital service. According to the Capital Improvement Program policy, a minimum of 0.20 mils of the general property tax levy will be set aside for capital improvements for the 2024 budget.
Thanks, Al. Is there a motion for this item? Sorry, just our budget process guidelines.
Support.
Moved and supported. Questions or comments regarding this process? Commissioner Coleman.
Thank you, Chair. I think these are good guidelines we've had in prior years as well. I'm just curious if there's any particular impacts we're going to see just in the higher interest rate environment. Like, does that impact any of our budgetary funds or areas?
Yes, I mean, it definitely impacts our CIP, both in terms of supply chain and in terms of inflation. And then also there's certain supply lines that we're going to see impacted. And we will plan for that impact.
Yes, Commissioner Antor.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to commend Kent County, I guess, for using zero-based budgeting, because I think it's really important. Not everybody does that, and I think that should be the standard for everyone in government to go that route, because sometimes you get really complacent and you just roll things out there, because that's the way we've always done things. So I do appreciate the fact that we do that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Wooden.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the calendar, it's in line with what we saw at our Budget Boot Camp work session. One question I did have was, we've talked about trying to find some method to at least have more board input in the budget process as a whole and the CIP, and I realize we're trying to build the plane as we're flying it. And so while I don't necessarily think we need to change the timeline in the approval, has there been any discussion about having some kind of ranking exercise for the CIP, since that's next up in the calendar?
I did address that in the note I sent the board Friday.
Okay,
We could have further discussion on that, too.
wonderful, thank you.
But, yeah.
All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. Seeing none, all those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. Next item comes from the Sheriff's Office. It's a request to provide school resource officer for Kentwood Public Schools.
Action requested. Recommend to the Board of Commissioners to enter into an agreement with Kentwood Public Schools to provide school resource officer, SRO, services, to add one new county patrol officer position, to transfer $29,300 from the Sheriff's 2023 general fund budget and appropriate $52,700 received from Kentwood Public Schools to the Sheriff's 2023 special project fund budget, and to authorize the board chair or designee to sign the agreements. Summary of request. The Sheriff's Office would like to contract with Kentwood Public Schools to add a CPO position to provide the school with SRO services. The SRO program is a collaborative effort between the schools, community, students, and law enforcement. This program creates a safe school environment by having a certified police officer assigned to a specific school district. The goal of the SRO program is to provide proactive law enforcement by working with educators, students, and parents to reduce crime, drug abuse, and violence in and around the school buildings and the school district. The cost for the officer is $140,572 annually, which consists of $124,868 in wages and benefits and $15,704 in vehicle, equipment, and operating costs. The $15,704 includes the annualized vehicle costs and assumes the purchase of a new vehicle and equipment once every 5 years. $82,000 of the annual costs, or 58% of the total, is requested to be appropriated in the 2023 budget for the period of March 1 to September 30. Pursuant to the agreement, the school district will pay 70% of the wage and benefit costs, or $87,408. The school district will also pay 70% of the $4,200 per year toward the cost of the vehicle used by the officer, or $2,940, for a total of $90,348. All other expenses, which include remaining vehicle, equipment, and operating costs, will be supported by the county's general fund at an approximate cost of $50,225. The applicable contract will be reviewed as to form by corporate counsel. If funding is eliminated or decreased, the position and/or vehicle addition will be eliminated unless continuation funding is approved pursuant to fiscal policy on grants, contracts, and donations.
Thank you. Is there a motion for this item? Man, everybody. Commissioner McLeod. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Commissioner Sparks. Questions or comments on this item? Commissioner Wooden.
Thank you. Just two questions. One, I wanted to confirm what I think I recall from legislative when this was reviewed. So, looking at the, I think it's the fourth bullet, the school district paying 70% of the wages and benefits and 70% of the vehicle costs. That's because this is their first county school resource officer, and that as others could be added, the district takes on a larger percentage of that officer's cost.
Correct, Commissioner. The first officer we share the cost with at a 70.
Forgive me, Deputy.
Yep, Brian Muir.
Wonderful. I just wanted to get your introduction for our.
I appreciate that, sorry. Correct. So as the program expands through the school districts, they will then bear all of the costs. We look at it as a cost-sharing model. Right now, our deputies are already responding to Kentwood schools on a regular basis. Just in the last couple of months alone, we've been there nearly 128 times, and we've responded with 48 different deputies, which doesn't provide consistency throughout the school district. And by having an SRO established within the school, we're hoping for some consistency and familiarize ourselves with the student population there as well.
Wonderful. And it makes perfect sense. I just was more curious of our overarching policy when it comes to district contribution. And that makes a great deal of sense. My second question, just because understandably so, often the SRO requests come as mid-year budgetary changes. One, school districts are on their own fiscal years, and other reasons. Because of that, it's sometimes harder for us to internalize the cost, the overall added costs this has to the general fund, and just knowing what that is, knowing that this investment is worthwhile. But if we can get maybe a history of how our contributions to school resource officers have increased over time, that will just help us understand, our contribution to this service, as useful and important as it is.
Sure, we can provide that.
Okay. Any other questions? Commissioner Antor.
Thank you. Morning, Brian.
Morning.
I'm just curious, when you place someone into a school, do you try to find somebody that's maybe a little bit towards the beginning of their career so they can kind of grow in that environment, or, so they can get to know the people and there will be some consistencies there, or?
Typically, an officer that has a few years' experience are better fit for the schools. They have a little bit more training and experience. But all school resource officers are selected ultimately by the school administrators. So we give them a panel of deputies with appropriate training and experience, and then let them interview them, select who they want, and then once they're selected, we make sure that they go through the continuing education to best prepare them to be a school resource officer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner McLeod.
Chair. Hi, Brad. So I was able to watch an interview, I believe, with a news agency for one of the school resource officers in a different school district, and it was really interesting to see kind of how they embed themselves within the school and get to know the students and work directly with the administration of the school to ensure that the students, are safe, but then also that they're developing relationships and trying to provide resources to the students that they're seeing come, through the school doors every day. Could you just provide a little bit of information in terms of how that works with the various school districts? I know they're all different, but, what does a day look like for one of these school resource officers, and how does that contribute to the school being safer, but then also the school being, the students feeling like they're supported as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a national standard set by the NASRA, which is the National Association of School Resource Officers, and it's a training that all of our school resource officers go through, and it focuses on what they call a triad method, which is safety, mentoring, and education. So all of the school resource officers that go into the schools, their secondary function would be that safety element. Just by being a law enforcement officer, it's there. However, we really focus on the mentoring and the education part. It's surprising the number of questions that young kids, even teenagers, will have about my vehicle's plates expired. What do I do about this? So we try to make sure that they have a resource that they can get these life questions answered that they may not have outside of the school. And the mentoring part of just having that daily interaction is really the focus of every school resource officer. They want to know who's in the school. They want to make sure that everyone in the school feels safe and comfortable to learn. And it's the priority of every school district, including the sheriff's office, when we put an SRO there, that the mentoring and the interaction with the kids in a non-confrontational way is the priority.
That's helpful. And then one other thought. So, I graduated 3 sons from Kentwood, and so I understand kind of the dynamic there. It's such a large school. There's lots of things going on. They have a huge public safety office, and I've not always been impressed with how they handle the things that are coming before them in terms of students. I wouldn't say student safety, but just how it's always been sort of, I feel like, punitive in a lot of ways, and I just wonder how the school resource officer would work with the public safety departments in the schools, especially big schools like Kentwood and Rockford and things like that, and help them understand kind of how to be able to look at the student first and not in a punitive way. And so does this training, these resources that the school resource officers are bringing in, does it help with that? I guess at some point it would be great to have some outcomes of this to share with everyone. But I'm just wondering, how does that school resource officer work directly with the public safety departments?
So they do work in conjunction with trying to do some threat analysis. If there's threats that come into the schools, there's information databases that law enforcement would have access to that maybe school security would not have access to. So we work in conjunction with administration. But our school resource officers don't interact on a day-to-day basis for disciplinary related issues within the school. And keeping that separation is what makes the program successful. So that way there's a comfort level with the students to approach law enforcement, understanding that we're not necessarily one entity together as school security, but they have a function for disciplinary actions, school violations, and then law enforcement has its own independent actions. So there is a cooperation, but there is also a separation of duties.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Coleman.
Thank you, Chair. I know many families are just very concerned, these days with, gun violence in particular, but violence in general in our communities and our schools especially. And so I'm so supportive of this model. I think it's a great model, the school resource officer model, between the county's part and school district's part and how it all works. I think it's just a really great model that's shown to be successful, down at Byron Center High School not that long ago. A brave student, a school resource officer who was on site, able to stop gun violence from occurring in that high school. So it makes a big difference, and I'm so supportive. I'm just curious, in Kentwood's setup particularly, I know it's kind of a weird jurisdictional lines with like East Kentwood High School being, outside of Kentwood technically. So what's the relationship? Are we covering all the schools in Kentwood Public Schools, or is there some coverage by the Kentwood Police Department? How does that work in this unique circumstance?
So typically we would provide a resource for all schools within the school district. However, the superintendent for Kentwood Schools is looking to focus on the freshman campus and the high school, which is within our jurisdiction. We do work with the Kentwood Police Department that has jurisdiction for the majority of the middle and elementary schools, but they're also suffering from resource. They're short officers, and they've pulled their officers that had some duties as liaisons, not as a full school resource officer within the school, but as a liaison to those schools, and they don't have the ability to meet those needs right now. So we would never turn our back if there's any issues within the city of Kentwood, but we would work with that jurisdiction to make sure it's handled appropriately.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, Commissioner Oliver King.
Thank you for your presentation, officer. I'm just curious, I understand the relationship with building with the school as well as building with students. Do you mind expanding on what relationship building happens with parents?
Yeah, so typically our parents will reach out to a school resource officer when they're having issues with some of their own students. If they feel there's disciplinary issues at home, and they reach out to us as kind of a mentor, and we'll sit down and talk to those students just a little bit about their behavior, both in school, out of school, how that'll have an impact on their futures. So we do find a comfort level with the parents reaching out to the school resource officer, and then we're also visible at most of the board meetings, the school board meetings, whereas the parents can reach out and talk to us. If there's ever a complaint about how our officers behave or interact, they can file that complaint with our officer. They can go to our professional standards at the sheriff's office, but we've really never found any conflict with parents. It's always been a supportive resource for them.
All right, any other questions or comments? I appreciate this. I'm very supportive, and, with Kentwood High School and a couple of the elementary schools being in my district in Gaines Township, I think it's great for our community to continue to build those positive relationships. So thanks for your time today. If there's no other questions or comments, let's take a vote. So all those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda comes from KCCA, the Kent County Community Action, KCCA, Weatherization Consumer Reimbursements.
Action requested. Recommend to the Board of Commissioners to appropriate $21,168 from Consumers Energy for the Weatherization Deferral Reduction Program to the 2023 Special Projects Fund. Summary of request. Kent County Community Action has received a total of $21,168 in rebates from Consumers Energy. The rebates were provided by Consumers Energy for measures installed in clients' homes. This funding will address health and safety issues that prevent completion of weatherization services on residential single-family and multifamily homes. Funds will be used for construction, reconstruction, improvement, or repairs to correct health and safety conditions that require a deferral from participation in energy efficiency and weatherization programs for households with low income. Improvements and repairs may include, but are not limited to, mold remediation, knob and tube wiring, roof repair or replacement, and minor plumbing repair.
All right, thank you. Is there a motion for this item? Moved and supported. Any questions or comments? Yes, Commissioner McLeod.
Yeah, I just wondered, just an estimate of how many homes this fairly small amount of rebate funding would be able to support for some of these things, because like mold remediation, knob and tube wiring, like that can get pretty pricey. So just wondering what your thoughts were in terms of how many homes that might actually be able to support.
Sure. Gustavo Perez, Director, Kent County Community Action. Roger, Project Supervisor for. But it is kind of just spread across, kind of reduce the cost. This is flexible dollars that we can use on top of other funding sources we have to move the project on.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this item? All right, seeing none, all those in favor, please say yes. Yes. All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda also comes from KCCA. It's the Kent County Community Action to approve the Home Investment Partnership Program, American Rescue Plan, the HOME-ARP Allocation Plan, and the 2021 Amended Annual Action Plan.
Action requested. Recommend to the Board of Commissioners to accept and approve the Home ARP Allocation Plan and the Community Development 2021 Amended Annual Action Plan. Summary of request. Kent County has been awarded a Home ARP grant for $3,352,764 provided through the U.S. Housing and Urban Development's Office of Community Planning and Development. This funding was appropriated on January 3, 2022 on Resolution 010322-5 with the provision that only $167,638 of the funding would be spent until the Board of Commissioners approved the Home ARP Allocation Plan and 2021 Amended Annual Action Plan. Kent County has completed the Home ARP Allocation Plan in compliance with HUD grant requirements, which required consultation with the local continuum of care and area service providers, a needs assessment, and gaps analysis to identify how funds may assist individuals or households who are homeless, at risk of homelessness, and other vulnerable populations. An amendment to the 2021 Annual Action Plan will be submitted to HUD following board approval to budget Home ARP funds as follows: up to $2 million toward tenant-based rental assistance, up to $849,849.40 for supportive services, and up to $502,914.60 for Home ARP administrative and planning purposes. Home ARP programming will be managed by the Kent County Community Action Department through the expiration of the Home ARP grant on September 30, 2030, or until funding is exhausted. Prior to signature, Corporate Counsel will review all documents as to form.
Thanks, Al. Is there a motion for this item?
Motion.
Moved by Commissioner Wooden. Is there support? Support. Support by Commissioner Sparks. All right, we do have members here from Baker Tilly that have a presentation, and we have Chad from KCCA, one of the program managers as well.
Morning, Commissioners. I'm Chad Kaufman, Program Manager for Community Development within the Community Action Department. I have with me today representatives of Baker Tilly, our consulting firm that was hired in September of 2021, or 2022, excuse me, to help us do a needs analysis in the county, focusing on the needs of the homeless population. I want to note that these home ARP dollars are directly from HUD and are separate from the ARPA dollars that has been previously allocated by the commission. I have with me today Daniel Jeru and Baron Bell, going to do a presentation on the needs analysis, let you know how we arrived at the allocation to award these or to budget these funds. So after the resolution passes and the board approves this, we will be submitting this draft plan to HUD for their review as well. And conversations with HUD were already favorable towards this budget allocation. Daniel and Baron?
Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for allowing us to be here. Daniel Giroux, Baker Tilly.
And Aaron Bell with Baker Tilly, also working for community development experts. Thank you for having us.
Okay, so what we're going to do is go through a quick presentation of an overview of home and home ARP funding, as well as the process that we went through to put together the home ARP plan, including stakeholder discussions from members of Kent County or from organizations in Kent County, as well as survey takers and citizens of Kent County that helped us really devise and choose where this funding was allocated. And then Baron will go over some point in time counts for homelessness here in the county as well. And we'll be glad to take any questions afterward. So I'm just going to read from here. The Home Investment Partnership Program provides grants annually to participating jurisdictions, of which Kent County is a participating jurisdiction. And I just want to make clear that Kent County is separate and apart from Grand Rapids when it comes to that participating jurisdiction. So this funding is for Kent County, separate of or excluding the city of Grand Rapids. So the American Rescue Plan allocated $5 billion nationwide in separate funding from the annual allocation from HUD to provide funding specifically for housing, rental assistance, supportive services, and non-congregate shelter to reduce homelessness and increase housing stability across the nation. And the home ARP allocation for Kent County for the consortium here is $3,352,000. So eligible populations that can benefit from this funding include those that are homeless, people that are at risk of homelessness, people fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or human trafficking. Other populations where providing supportive services or assistance would prevent the family's homelessness or would serve those at greater risk of homelessness, and also veterans and families that include a veteran that meets one of the preceding criteria. And then eligible activities that the funding can be used for are production or preservation of affordable housing, tenant-based rental assistance or TBRA, supportive services, including those supportive services defined at 24 CFR 578.53. We can go over some of the supportive services identified later in the presentation, as well as the purchase and development of non-congregate shelter. Throughout the process, we're required to get stakeholder feedback, so consult with local stakeholders throughout the community. Those virtual meetings were held back in September on the 12th, 13th, and 15th of that month. A total of 118 agencies were invited to participate. And I do want to point out the 17 and 25 is an inverted number. That should say that 25 individuals representing 17 agencies participated in these focus groups. So a larger number of individuals rather than agencies. Throughout the stakeholder feedback, the greatest area of need identified as a potential use of home funds is the construction of new affordable rental housing. Excuse me. And also highly discussed were support services, specifically for tenants, including financial planning services, deposit assistance for rent and utilities, ESL classes, and mental health services. At the conclusion of that stakeholder feedback, we released a survey that went out to the public. It was released virtually, as well as paper copies were made available. We had 89 respondents. There was an English language survey and a Spanish language survey. There were no respondents for the Spanish language survey, so all 89 were English, or English speakers, or people that took the English language survey. And when asked to rank community housing needs, construction of new affordable housing was ranked as the most important. As you can see, these three different categories here, including the construction of new and affordable housing, emergency shelter, and then permanent supportive housing. It was a ranking question, so they could rank 1, 2, and 3. So that's why you see some differences in responses across those three. And when asked to identify the top 3 most important issues concerning the lack of availability of quality housing, lack of affordable rental housing was ranked first, above and beyond the others at above 40%. And finally, when residents were asked what they observed to be the greatest gap in services or unmet need in the community, mental health services was ranked first. We also had quite a few respondents for transportation services as well as financial counseling. There is an other bucket there. We had like 13 responses in other, and that much of the respondents kind of reverted back to like tangible housing instead of support services, so didn't really fall in with those. But I did want to call out that since we had 13 out of the 89.
Thank you, Daniel. So what we have here, and you barely maybe can see it on the board here, but the information that we have is from the point-in-time survey that was done within the continuum of care for Kent County, which is done in January. The purpose of the point-in-time survey is to enumerate the number of persons within a jurisdiction that are homeless on any given night. And what we found for the Kent County region, for example, if you look at the top corner, that's emergency shelter, we had 308 beds available in 83 units for emergency shelters for families, and we had 596 adult-only beds. If we go to the middle towards the bottom there, we have the sheltered homeless, which for families, we had 112, and adults who were homeless but within a shelter, 597. Of those, 66 were veterans, and we had 86 persons within a shelter that were fleeing or experiencing some form of domestic violence. Now, for our unsheltered, and this is key to our particular presentation, according to the point-in-time survey, which again is in January, we had 3 families that were unsheltered, that were homeless. For adults, we had 39 who were unsheltered. Vets, 3 were enumerated, and we had 3 victims of domestic violence enumerated. So I would also like to read briefly information that we also use within our planning, which was from the 2021 to 2025 Kent Grand Rapids Consolidated Plan, which is a HUD document to determine the use of funds for a 5-year period for the Community Development Block Grant Program, Home Investments and Partnership Program, and for other cities' Emergency Solutions Grant, and HOPWA, Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS. Within that plan that was enacted in 2021, the 5-year strategic plan, one of the outcomes, outcome number 1, was prevent and resolve episodes of homelessness. And it read, support efforts to obtain or retain housing stability for individuals and families experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness. And in the strategy section in that document, it read specifically, there are significant emergency shelter beds and transitional housing resources in the Kent County region. The coordinated entry system allows agencies to assess the housing needs of the homeless persons and make the appropriate placement based on their housing needs. So, based upon the data in the point-in-time survey, based upon our consultations with the individuals who provide services to the homelessness, we didn't see a need for emergency units and transitional shelter housing within the continuum of care for Kent County. And again, this is not speaking particularly to Grand Rapids. So do understand that's the reason at the bottom of the chart to the right, where we are asked to fill in the gap, we have zeros there. So it's not something that we didn't observe, but the existing planning documents show that there are existing resources to address homelessness within the region. And the point-in-time survey does show that the number of unsheltered homeless persons on the night of the point-in-time survey were very, very small. Now, on this next particular chart here, we have point-in-time data again. So the ARP funds is not just for people who are homeless, but we're also trying to help people who are at risk of homelessness and also persons who are at greater risk of housing instability. So persons who are at risk of homelessness, their incomes are 30% and below the median income, and then persons who are at greater risk of housing instability have a little higher incomes, but it's 50% and below the median. So if you look at the numbers in the charts here without having to, call out any particular number, what we have here is there are a lot of individuals in the Kent County area that are at risk of homelessness, meaning they could, or at greater risk of housing instability, meaning they can afford affordable housing, they don't need shelter and transitional housing, but you just need some resources to stimulate to make additional units available. So therefore, our findings pretty much fall in line with using these funds to help persons with affordable housing, not necessarily to build and expand emergency shelters and transitional shelter units.
And again, this chart is small, and if we can go ahead and flip to the next slide. But this is our allocation of funding, and I'm actually going to go ahead and flip it because I cannot read that. During discussions for the allocation of funding, it was decided that Kent County will allocate $2 million of its home ARP allocation award toward tenant-based rental assistance. A lot of what we heard, again, I will reiterate, from stakeholder discussions and survey respondents was that new affordable housing was the priority. In the process of us carrying out this home ARP plan, Kent County had decided to allocate almost $20 million of ARP funding separate from this home funding to develop new and affordable housing. So along with Chad and his team, decided that since that box was, kind of checked, if you will, that highest priority need was already being taken care of. The second priority would be through tenant-based rental assistance, so that those people are nearing homelessness or are homeless currently would be able to use tenant-based rental assistance funds from this funding to get into that new affordable housing once it comes online, of course, over the next year or so because of construction timelines. With that tenant-based rental assistance, the addition of that $2 million, it is estimated that a minimum of 277 households at highest risk of homelessness will be supported through these funds based on up to $1,000 of assistance per month per household for a period of up to 24 months. We had to put that limit of 24 months there because this is one-time funding. When it goes away, it's gone. And then for the other portion of the funding, Kent County will allocate $849,849 of its home ARP allocation towards supportive services. We had a lot of discussion about need for supportive services, including wraparound services for those persons living in affordable housing. So this funding will specifically provide supportive services to households that meet one or more of the conditions of persons that are homeless or at risk of homelessness. We can come back to this slide. I do just want to go ahead and state that there were no preferences made. So funds made available under the home ARP allocation plan will not make use of any preferences for any qualifying population, which just means that tenant-based rental assistance and supportive services will be provided on a first-come, first-served basis to those who need it.
All right, are there any questions here? Commissioner Antor.
Good morning, thank you for this. This is pretty enlightening stuff. I got a lot of questions, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but one of the things you just talked about, $1,000 a month for 24 months. What happens after the 24 months? All of a sudden that money goes away. It seems like we'd be paying partial rent for 24 months, and after that, they're back to where they were, right? How do people get motivated to make up for that if they're getting it for nothing, I guess?
How
I
does that
think
work?
a lot of that, and I may let Chad jump in here too. My first reaction is the supportive services that are being provided. In addition, the almost $900,000 there. So those wraparound services will be provided to the people living in that affordable housing, whether that is through financial planning, education services, job services, workforce
Is
services.
that part of this?
Yes, so that those support services all fall under that. Now, this allocation plan does not designate where exactly those support service funding will be distributed. This just doesn't dive that deep. We just have to say that it's going to be attributed to support services.
Okay.
Daniel hit on primarily that, this isn't just we're cutting a check and letting you be. It does come with putting people in touch with supportive services, but it is one-time funding. After that 24 months is done, there's only $2 million total available coming from HUD, and it is a one-time funding coming from HUD. But the intent is to connect people with supportive services in the community. The program will be operated in partnership with staff at Community Action, who have connection to other funding sources and supportive services, as well as any community partners that we bring on board to help operate the program.
Well, thank you for that. I had a couple other quick questions.
ahead,
As far as the ARP funding for Grand Rapids, do you know what that amount is?
It was higher. I think it was in the neighborhood of $4.6 million just for the city of Grand Rapids. I'm not certain but it was about that dollar amount.
So this money, is it earmarked for outside of Grand Rapids then?
Correct.
And then, so like in our ARPA funding, about 70% of the funding projects went to Grand Rapids nonprofits, even though it was a countywide program. They had gotten their own separate ARPA funding. So we didn't divide it. We still end up spending a lot of money within the city of Grand Rapids. This is different.
Yeah, this funding is different. So Kent County and the city of Grand Rapids separately are both grantees of HUD. And so we both received funding directly from HUD to focus on our own jurisdiction. So unlike the other ARPA dollars that have already been allocated where Kent County didn't have, Kent County itself received funding for the whole of Kent County, and then Grand Rapids also received it to focus on Grand Rapids. But with the regular ARPA funding, there wasn't a jurisdictional
Right.
boundary attached.
Okay, and I guess my last question would be, I've heard a lot about the lack of affordable housing in Kent County. I know that's accurate. What keeps the market from, or developers that come in to build it? I mean, if there's that big of a market, why isn't it happening just through the natural course of the market? Why does it need, what's the disconnect there? Why aren't people developing those projects if there's a need? It seems like it'd be a good financial benefit for everybody involved.
In general, when developers come in and develop affordable housing, it requires some type of incentive or developer stack, as it's typically called, to put toward, say, 40% of units out of 100. So say 40% of units out of 100 were being designated for affordable housing. Each of those individual units cost $200,000. Say it's a two-bedroom, costs $200,000. The developer and, in the end, the owner will not be able to make as much money off of that individual units. So that's what's beautiful about these ARP funds that are being utilized at almost $20 million. It can be used as, I don't want to put words in Chad's mouth here, but it can be used in the developer stack to help developers develop the residential units for affordable housing.
Section 8 play into this at all with?
That's more to the answer to the question that you're asking. Historically, public affordable housing units have been made available by public housing and Section 8, and they have other programs, Section 235, Section 236. The federal government is not really doing that intensely any longer. So affordable housing development throughout the nation is mostly done through low-income housing tax credits. So with these populations that are served by the grants, their incomes are like 30% and 50% of median. So the debt service ratio is tough to make that back because the revenue, the rents that you're going to get from an affordable housing project is not going to be as high as you would do some other like market rate of housing. And just for everyone, in the room, what we found through our studies with some other people that we've done this, other jurisdictions that we've done this for, Airbnb, believe it or not, is knocking out affordable units out of the market. People can get more money taking their unit to Airbnb than renting it or even selling it, and that's even pricing out people who need housing all across the nation. We found that. Yeah.
I appreciate your gentleman's presentation. Thank you.
There's, lots of other factors too. I think, zoning, from what I understand too, has kind of created a pinch in developing affordable housing. So I think there's several factors that we'll be looking at in the future as we kind of dig into the housing issue here in Kent County. So, good questions. Yeah, Commissioner Wooden.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to underline that, I mean, just frankly put, the rents that one can get from someone making 50%, from someone who earns 50% of AMI and below, would never justify any kind of private, exclusive, market-based housing solution. Even if we had a housing unit available on the market for everyone looking, that market, and we brought that market equilibrium to where it needs to be, that rent would still be higher than what folks at that level could afford. And that's why, certainly makes a great deal of sense how we're maximizing the use of these dollars through TBRA. I was just, full disclosure to the Baker Tilly guys, I work for one of those low-income housing tax credit developers in my day job. And, just looking at the numbers we had, if we just put that exclusively into housing development, the most we could build out of it, 8, 12 at most, and that's building at a almost too economical point of view that you'd be worried about long-term sustainability of that asset versus 277 households that we can serve for a longer period. Certainly, there's that cliff that we have to worry about, but if we're trying our best to get folks housed to that point of stability that they can hopefully find opportunities that pull them out of this of housing instability, this is the way to maximize that impact. So I appreciate the thought that you all put into this, and looking forward to approving our home ARP plan.
Commissioner Sparks.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to say thank you for all the work that you've put into this. We all know that across America, affordable or attainable housing is something that everyone in every community is struggling with. I'd look at the stats here and the rates, 652,000 residents, yet we only had 25, 17, respond. It tells me that the crisis is even deeper than we think, because people are giving up hope. They are tired, they're scared, they're living in their cars because they just cannot afford somewhere to live. And it breaks my heart because we deserve more. Like, our community deserves more. And we have to figure out a way that we can take some of these older buildings, refurbish them, these bigger monstrosities that are just eyesores. And I don't know how it's going to happen, but I believe that you guys are going to help us. And I believe that Kent County, now that we're, kind of turning a corner with our new administration, I appreciate that Al has a bigger picture for the residents of Kent County, and I appreciate our board, because I really feel like even with our minority chair pushing and, some of the other people that are now on board, that we're going to be able to turn a corner and stop turning a blind eye to the people that are living on our streets. So thank you.
A major problem also, if I can add briefly to that.
Can you make sure you're talking to the mic? Sorry. Just so the people online can hear.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, so a major thing to consider, also in planning and allocating resources, and we've been finding this across the nation, there are a lot of jurisdictions who are now looking at a source of income discrimination as a protective class. So even in our studies here, people have a voucher that can pay for housing at close to market rates, but a lot of the landlords won't even accept the vouchers because they can get that much more money elsewhere. So what we decided to do with Chad and his group is use the monies here for vouchers to take advantage of some of the other subsidized housing that you have coming online, so you can appreciate the combination of the allocation of resource maybe a bit better.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, all those in favor, please say yes. Yes. All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. Item number 7 on the agenda is miscellaneous. Is there any commissioner miscellaneous? All right, seeing none, we are adjourned, and our next meeting will be Tuesday, March 21 at 8:30 a.m. Thanks.